Good afternoon, and welcome to the ongoing series of Masonic Temple speeches. My name is John Minot, and I'll be talking about the Alhambra Palace Fortress and the civilization that gave rise to it, as well as a little bit of comparison of where the rooms, Oriental Hall, where the different designs uh, were copied from the Alhambra. The magnificent Alhambra was built chiefly between 2028 and 1358, and the name Alhambra comes from the Arabic, which literally means red castle. The reddening of the castle white stucco walls due to the high iron content in the local earth. It is a North African Moorish in style and a relic of the magnificent Al-Andalus, Islamic word for Spain, civilization that survived in Spain for about 800 years, from 711 AD till 1492. And it is thought to have been one of the few times in human history where Jews, Christians, and Muslims coexisted under a benevolent Muslim regime called the convivencia, or coexistence. You see a map where Granada is in the south of Spain. The word for Allah in Muhammad, born 5070, 1632, was an Arab religious, social, and political leader and the founder of Islam. And according to Islamic doctrine, he was a prophet divinely inspired to preach and confirm the monotheistic teachings of Adam, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, as well as the Quran, where his teachings and practices forming the basis of Islamic religious belief. This is actually a 19th century photograph in North Africa, but I loved it with the camels and the manners. Actually, they used the camel to ride to the battle scenes and to transport water and provisions. And the war horses, they're magnificent Arabian war horses, bred for speed, endurance, soundness, and intelligence, arrived at the battle attached to the saddles. Camels could not be used for combat because they're notorious truculence and lack of cooperation. See a map of the broad sweep of Arabian Arab conquest going all the way to India and practically to China, and then on the other side to the Atlantic and up through what is now Spain. And they even made it to Tours in the northern France, which was as far as they got. They were defeated by a Frankish king, Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer. You have the Islamic state's golden age, roughly from 786 to 1258, where the Mongols put an end to it with their siege of Baghdad. Was a period of scientific, economic, and cultural flourishing. Scholars from all over the Muslim world flocked to Baghdad, the world's largest city, to translate the known world's classical knowledge into Arabic. The Arabs got the knowledge of Persia, the Byzantine Greek states. They got paper from China, the first book printed on paper in Europe was paper made in Al-Andalusia. The Missal of Silos, believed to have been created around 1080 AD. And they got from India the Damascus steel, which served them well in their conquest, as well as the crucial zero, which contributed a lot to the advances in mathematics. In 711, a Berber commander was about 7,000 troops, landed at Gibraltar. His name was Tariq ibn Ziyad, and he gave his name to Gibraltar, Tariq's Mountain. And it took about 7 years for the Arabs to conquer most of what was then the Visigothic kingdom. The Visigoths were a migratory German or Gothic tribe, and they actually had been Romanized. They were actually serving the Romans when they arrived. They were supposed to subdue their fellow Gothic tribes, such as the Vandals. Now, the Spanish feel that the Visigoths, that Spain was born nationally in 573 and spiritually in 589, when the Visigoths officially became Catholic. And some Visigoth nobles escaped to Asturias in the north of Spain and founded the first Catholic kingdom that was to lead to Castile and Leon. And they feel that all the subsequent Spanish reconquest of Spain was to seek the legitimacy of this original Visigothic kingdom, to restore the legitimate Christian kingdom of the Visigoths all over Spain. The Reconquista, or the reconquest of Spain. The Visigoths actually are often viewed as a dark, barbaric period between the glory of the Roman Empire and Al-Andalus, the Islamic state. But actually, they had been Romanized. They had a lot of Roman culture. They had their very sophisticated law system, the Lex Visigothorum, or law of the Visigoth. They actually were using the Moorish horseshoe arch before the Arabs. They were the ones who introduced the bathing culture of Andalusia, was a Roman Visigothic tradition. And they were one of the most sophisticated 17th century European states, with their writing was the richest in Europe at the time. The Mosque Cathedral of Cordoba, 1785-971, became a cathedral in 1236. And they are still sort of fighting over it. The Catholic Church wanted to drop mosque in the title, and they claim that it was built on the foundations of a church, so that they were just restoring the cathedral when they took it over. The cathedral was started by Rahman, 1731-1788, founder of the Islamic Emirate Caliphate of Cordoba, 1750-1031. He was fleeing the Abbasids dynasty in Baghdad, who had massacred his whole family, but he managed to escape and form the Caliphate in Al-Andalusia. This is a painting of Al-Rahman III receiving an ambassador from Otto the Great of Germany. And the painting was done in 1885 by Dioniso Baxiras Verdaguer. And the period of the Caliphate is seen as the golden age of Al-Andalus. Cordoba had more than 500,000 people, eventually overtaking Constantinople as the largest and most prosperous city in Europe. Al-Andalus became a center for the arts, medicine, science, music, literature, and philosophy. The work of the most important philosophers and scientists, such as Abul Qasis and Averroes, had a major influence on the intellectual life of medieval Europe. Muslims and non-Muslims came from abroad to study at the libraries and universities of Al-Andalus. And after the reconquest of Toledo, several translation institutes, such as the Toledo School of Translators, which used Christians, Muslims, and Jews, were established to translate book and text from Arabic into Latin. The man standing in the middle is Hassadeh ibn Shakrut, a Jewish scholar born in Jaén, Spain. And here you actually have the modern Spanish celebrating his birth in Jaén. And among other things, he was a brilliant diplomat, and he fought for the Jewish rights all over the Mediterranean basin, and he was a leader in the Jewish Renaissance that took place in Al-Andalus. And one of his most things he's famous for is translating a magnificent codex of Pedanius Dioscorides' work on botany, which Arab physicians and naturalists valued highly. And this had come to Cordova as an embassy, a gift from the Byzantine emperor, who was hard-pressed at the time and seeking diplomatic relations with Cordova. Ibn Rushd, 1126-1198, Latinized as Averroes, was an Andalusian polymath and jurist who wrote about many subjects: philosophy, theology, medicine, astronomy, physics, psychology, mathematics, and Islamic jurisprudence, and law and linguistics. He also is very famous for his in-depth commentaries on Aristotle, for which he became known in the Western world as literally just the commentator and the father of rationalism. Abu Hassan al-Khalasadi, a Granadian mathematician, 1412-1486. His famous commentary on the science of arithmetic introduced new algebraic symbols, moving beyond the simple notations that earlier mathematicians such as Diophantus, Greek, circa 250, and Brahmagupta, Hindu, died around 1668, had established. Various tiles from the Alhambra, and they're all very mathematical. They use the geometric patterns. These tiles are simply clay squares that the Nasrids coated with mineral-colored glaze and cut into different geometric shapes. Hundreds of these tiny multicolored tiles fit like a puzzle on blank backgrounds with the color side facing down. They were then framed in wood, and mortar was poured over them, and once hardened, the mosaics could be hung on a wall. But to repeat, they all have brilliant geometric patterns. Contrary to popular belief, the Moors did not introduce irrigation to the peninsula, they did improve and expand significantly on what the Romans had done, and they also borrowed Persian technology to expand the terrain available for cultivation. And they brought a whole variety of fruits and vegetables previously unknown to Europe, such as eggplants, artichokes, melons, bananas, spinach, asparagus, figs, dates, and citrus fruit. And they also expanded the normal crops that the Roman had been growing, like olives and wheat. And this agricultural revolution gave a strong financial base to the economy, which allowed the brilliant civilization of Al-Andalus to develop. The Arabs had distillation, which they couldn't drink it themselves because they were forbidden alcohol, but they used it in medicines. But certainly the non-Muslims thoroughly enjoyed their hard liquor, and I'm afraid even corrupted a fair number of their Muslim brothers who fell in love with wine and alcohol. Oh, and also before Marco Polo, the Arabs had pasta. There's a mention of a Arab woman at a monastery preparing pasta for a feast way before Marco Polo. And here you see one of the magnificent gardens of the Alhambra, where they use their hydraulic knowledge to great effect. Oxford University, there is evidence of teaching as early as 1096, making it the oldest university in the English-speaking world and the world's second oldest university in continuous operation. And Islamic knowledge jump-started these European medieval universities and helped later to power the Renaissance. Example of Moroccan tiles, and you see the ones in the pool are very similar to the tiles from the court of the fish pond, and these are the ones used in Oriental Hall. And here another version, you saw the same pattern on the walls of the Moroccan temple here at a room in the Alhambra. Oh, I showed this again. I want to show you a sequence of the similarities between Morocco, the Alhambra, and Christian Spain. This is Morocco, the Alhambra court of the Myrtles, and here is the Royal Palace Seville, done in 1364, 1366, by Pedro the Cruel, a king of Castile and Leon. His dates were 1334 and 1369. And I have to admit, one can but speculate how a medieval king actually managed to be called the Cruel when you sort of view most of them as being fairly severe. An Arab and a Jew playing chess. The Christians and Jews were called Demis, or Demis, as people of the book, Abrahamic Jews and Christians. They had limited autonomy. They were second-class citizens, but they had full rights to practice their religion, as well as full protection by their Muslim rulers. There was a specific tax called the jizya that Demis had to pay to receive these benefits, having its origin in the Quran. The jiva, was not only a tax, but also a symbolic expression of subordination. Now, occasionally, Jews and Christians ran into trouble. Between 1850 and 1859, for instance, there were 48 martyrs killed by the Muslim authorities But it is sort of my impression that these Christians went out of their way to provoke the Muslim jurists. And one of several pogroms against the Jews took place in Granada in 1066. But what had happened there is a Jewish vizier had ruled for about 20 years, and the Muslim population, which felt that they should never be under, by Quranic law, under a Jew or a Christian, got very angry and killed the vizier and massacred most of the Jewish population of Granada. But this reminds me, I forgot to mention earlier that the rulers of Al-Andalusia did use Jewish and Christian functionaries to help them run their kingdom, even though it was against the Quran theoretically, as no Muslim should be under the authority of a non-Muslim. Now, this is a book, the Tafsira del Mancibo de Arevalo, which describes an underground network of intellectual Muslims, Jews, and Christians in Spain in the 1520s, cooperating after the Jews were theoretically expelled. And it just goes to, I'm using that as an example. If they were trying to cooperate for intellectual reasons after the Jewish expulsion, it's not at all surprising that they cooperated to produce that great explosion of intellectual genius that was Islamic Spain. A Muslim and Jewish woman, a medieval couple. Now, in Muslim Spain was a patriarchy, and a Muslim could marry a Jewish or Christian woman, but a Muslim woman could not marry a Muslim. And this is true of most of the Christians and Jewish cultures, is that they were much more accepting of their men straying with women of other faiths, and then very protective of their women. The women of Al-Andalus obviously formed a significant part of life in Andalus in the Middle Ages, even reaching positions and holding roles in law, religion, patronage of the arts. And especially many of them were poets at a time when all educated Arabs in Spain loved poetry, and they was considered an example of an educated Arab. And they filled both public and private spaces, making women more visible. Now, this was in the Caliphate or Cordoba period. Later on, when the two Berber regimes took over at the end, they were much more fundamental Muslims. But the women were restricted. For instance, commercial dealings between the sexes were restricted, allowing only for good and trustworthy men to buy and sell with women, and only under careful public scrutiny. Well, this is a brief map showing the Reconquista, or the reconquering of Spain from the Muslims, and you can see gradually they end up with just Granada at the bottom. Now, as I mentioned, the Catholic Spanish Catholics justified this as just retaking their ancient Visigothic kingdom. Now, Granada survived for a variety of reasons. It was very mountainous terrain, hard to invade. For most of their history, they had a very competent military, they were saved by the plague once, but till it was no longer of use to them, the Catholic monarchs viewed Granada's trade with the Mediterranean basin and the tribute that they paid as very valuable. But later on, they got entangled with the Turks and other problems and no longer viewed Granada as an asset. Upon visiting the Alhambra, an ambassador of the Venetian Republic explained most of the space is occupied by a lovely palace that belonged to the Moorish kings. It is very beautiful and very sumptuous, made with fine marble and other things. The marbles are not on the walls, but on the floor. The decoration is partly stucco, generously gilded, and partly gilded ivory. These materials, however appealing to the eye, contributed to the fragility of the structure and ultimately to the seeming never-ending building and rebuilding of pieces of the Alhambra after fits of destruction. And the Arabs viewed, actually sort of like the Freemasons, that beauty was a manifestation of God's creation to enjoy and to gain knowledge of life after death. It concerned sensual pleasures on the level, while on the second level, knowledge and intellect led to a greater understanding of beauty. 10 kings of the Nasrid Arab dynasty. There were about 20 or 22 of these emirs. The Nasrid dynasty lasted from 1238 to 1492. This is painted on sheepskin, probably by Christian artists, and Granada was the swan song of Andalusia and the golden age of Arab culture. It's the Hall of the Two Sisters. The lace-like quality of the walls of the Alhambra were created using stucco, which is a mixture of plaster and marble powder, and carving into the substance while it was still drying. The stucco was also the material used to create the honeycomb ceilings in the Hall of the Abersanjaris, which some details are in our Oriental Hall, and the Hall of the Two Sisters. And another example of the use of stucco at the Alhambra. This is the Hall of the Abersanjaris. They were a rival Arab family to the Nasrids, and at one point, the last king of Granada, Boabdil, turned on them and massacred them in the Hall of the Abersanjaris, and a general bloodbath that entered into legend. It is said that the fountain flowed not with water, but with blood. The crest of the Nasrid dynasty at the Hall of the Abersanjaris. Here it is, recreated in Oriental Hall. The Court of the Lions, one of the principal palaces of the Nasrid kings, and the very famous lion fountain. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the tile design in Oriental came from, no, sorry, I am wrong. It was not from the Court of the Lions. And here is a column in Oriental showing some similarities to the columns at the Court of the Lions. The ceilings were made of varying shades of cedar wood, but the most prominent is that of the Hall of the Ambassadors. Here the ceiling is laid out in 7 layers of cedar, each of different color, and decorated with 8 and 16 pointed stars. Here is the design in more detail. The ceiling was originally meant to represent the 7 heavens of the Islamic faith, depict the stars of paradise, and symbolize the four trees of life. With its diagonal structures, the technique called artisonado consisted of assembling lengths of small wooden panels and molding in order to fabricate ceilings. This method was used in order to craft the cosmological significance of the Hall of the Ambassadors. And here is the version of the Masonic Temple of the Hall of the Ambassadors. The Court of the Myrtles, you see the design, and here you have the design in Oriental Hall. The surrender of the last king of Granada to Ferdinand and Isabella, painted by Francisco Padilla Ortiz in 1882. On January 2nd, 1492, Mohammed XII of Granada, Boabdil, surrendered the Emirate of Granada, the city of Granada, and the Alhambra Palace to the Castilian forces. The war was a joint project between husband and wife, Isabella, who had the crown of Castile, and Ferdinand, the king of Aragon. And in 1492, the Jews were exiled from Spain. And here is a drawing of the Moriscos leaving Spain. They were descendants of Spain's Muslim population who had been forced to convert to Christianity. Out of a total, in 1609, out of a total Morisco population of about 500,000, around 40% avoided expulsion altogether, and tens of thousands of those expelled managed to return. Now, in the popular Arab imagination today, Al-Andalus is viewed as the lost paradise, and it is felt by many that convivencia or coexistence was achieved almost perfectly in Islamic Spain, as we have seen, maybe not perfectly. Also, Islamic feminism today views Al-Andalus as a form of Islamic feminism, and that because they're reluctant to completely accept a European-driven feminism. And the Palestinians, for instance, view their exile from their land as the same way that the Jews and Christians were, and the Muslims were kicked out of Andalusia. Now, I want to conclude by saying that, yes, it wasn't an idyllic, perfect kumbaya moment in Islamic Spain for Christians and Jews, but at the middle, especially the great Cordovan emirate, the economy was booming, food was bountiful, there was an exciting ferment of ideas being exchanged within Jews, Christians, and Muslims, sort of the saying that a rising tide raises all boats. So I think I want to leave you with the view that, yes, maybe it certainly wasn't perfect. And when towards the end, when two very austere Berber dynasties took over, they reverted more to fundamental Islam. But in general, it was actually a pretty splendid civilization. Thank you.